What's going on, football fam? My name is Dave Sarner, and welcome to another edition of the Rise and Fall Fantasy Football Show. This is the Week 10 edition. Now, in today's episode, we're going to go through every game as it states on the Week 10 docket here and make sure that you are ready for your fantasy matchups. But before we do, just a quick note, guys. If you are watching this video after Thursday morning, around Thursday afternoon for the Thursday night game, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday morning, make sure you check down in the description. Make sure you have all the news, notes, and injury updates that you need to be relevant for this matchup, as all of these episodes are recorded every Thursday morning. With all that being said, guys, enjoy this week's episode and good luck on your matchups. Now, to start us off here, guys, on our Week 10 matchups here, we have a pretty good one here on the Thursday night game. It's going to be the Indianapolis Colts against the Tennessee Titans. Now, the Tennessee Titans are a 2-point home favorite here, and maybe they should be, maybe they shouldn't. I'm not really sure. What I do know for sure is that if there's one good offense in this game and one good defense, most likely Tennessee's the one with the good offense and Indianapolis is the one with the good defense. At least that's been the theme all year. Although now is a really interesting way of deciding, hey, am I going to start some guys from these games? Now, personally, I'm going to tell you right now, guys, I'm not excited to start anyone from this game outside of maybe A.J. Brown. That all being said, there is some value in this game that we need to discuss. Now, obviously, let's start with Indianapolis, the away team coming in to play the Tennessee Titans in an AFC matchup here. Let's see here. They ranked 32nd against the quarterbacks, 31st against running backs, 32nd against tight ends, and they are 22nd against wide receivers. What that means, guys, is they're letting up the least amount of points to quarterbacks, tight ends, the second least amount of points to running backs, and the 22nd most points to wide receivers. So about the 10, probably top 10 in the fewest points given up at every position this year. That's tough to deal with here, guys. And it's going to be really tough for Tennessee on the other side of this, hosting this defense. However, their offense is significantly better than Indianapolis Colts. Let's be real here. That Colts offense has not gotten going this year with Phillip Rivers, with that passing game. I don't think any of us can actually name a receiver that we're starting for them right now. And if you're going to say T.Y. Hilton, you're lying. Let's be real. You haven't put him in for at least 4 weeks now. So on the other side of that, though, there is a wide receiver. Obviously, we need to talk about him. He has been a stud in year 2. He missed 2 games, and he's still putting up amazing numbers right now. I'm talking about A.J. Brown. Listen, guys, if you have A.J. Brown, you're going to start him this week. I don't care if Indianapolis' defense is pretty tough. I don't care if they're really good all over the place. The bottom line is there is points to be scored against the wide receiver, or the cornerbacks, rather, for the Indianapolis Colts. People forget, it's Xavier Rhodes. Honestly, I forgot who the other guy's name was. I know they had Pierre Desir. He's gone. So they lost a bunch of pieces here. And Xavier Rhodes in that secondary has played pretty well. So that all being said, though, it is the weakest group on their team. As we mentioned, they are ranked 22nd against wide receivers. Right now, that's around 19 targets a game for wide receivers. That teams are averaging around 12 catches total. Not the greatest. 157 yards receiving, and around a touchdown is what the Colts are giving up in terms of the average towards wide receivers. So with that all being said, if I had to divvy up that, that production that they would allow up, I would assume it's going to be A.J. Brown. Corey Davis could have a decent game, don't get me wrong here, but I'm not going to be overly excited to go in and play Corey Davis in this matchup on Thursday night on a short week. I just won't. He didn't do that great last week, right? I think pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, that guy kind of fell off in week 9 here. Let's see here. Yeah, Corey Davis, 3 targets, 0 points. I mean, when I say that he really fizzled out, he fizzled out. And that's not even surprising. We talked about that last week on the show, so you guys got to be aware. You don't just chase 1 week production. You got to really identify if it's going to be consistent production and if it's someone that is worthy of dropping someone on your team for. Sure, there's desperations. Sure, you need to make situations happen when making moves, and you're going to have to make those moves because you have injuries. I get that. But slow it down a little bit. Make sure you're not getting rid of value for guys who are just not going to give you that at the end of the year or even the very next week. I mean, he puts up 22 points. He had 12 points. Well, guess what? Back to 0. Now, he did have, consistently this week, guys, he's been putting up good points, so it is a good pickup. In a half-point PPR, let's see, he had, he's not seeing less than 5 targets outside of last week. And that was only 1 week. Outside of that, man, he had 8 targets, 10 last week, 10 the week before. 8 in week 1, and he's averaging, if you take out the zeros, the 2 games he didn't play 2 weeks ago, and the 1 game this week, I mean, he's averaging double-digit fantasy points. So, in a half-point PPR. So that's not bad. I mean, I'm fine with that. But just be realistic that this guy is the number 2 fiddle here, and that passing game is going to have struggles. Tannehill is not elite, but he'll give you some really good games. But I think he's kind of come down to the mean a little bit here. You look at the quarterbacks. Last week, he had 14.6 fantasy points, 158 yards, 2 touchdowns. Now, you could say that the defense stepped up here. Desmond King, I think, got a return touchdown. He's the new addition on this team from Los Angeles. So I think this could have been game script a little bit here. I mean, obviously, Tannehill had a down week. Obviously, Derrick Henry had a down week here, 68 yards, I believe. Yeah, 21 for 68. So I do expect it to be a little different now. Now, in terms of production, not as good for Derrick Henry this week, guys. He's going up this week against the 31st ranked run team. They are giving up an average of 62 yards a game. And really, I mean, it's just that tells you everything you need to know about this running attack. Derrick Henry just had his worst fantasy performance of the year, guys. And with that stat, I think it might, I'm not going to say it's going to be the worst, but I think he might have a kind of repeat game. I don't think it's going to be amazing. I don't think he's going to do as bad as the 6 points. I still think he'll put up I think he'll get a touchdown. But this week in particular, he is very touchdown dependent in my opinion. And that's the difference with him from where we've seen him in previous weeks. Previous weeks, you could throw in Derrick Henry, and no matter what, you knew he was going to put up really big points. It just felt that way, right? This is kind of one of those weeks I actually am more on the touchdown dependent side. He's not seeing the receptions at all from running back position to warrant volume. And while rushing volume's there, 21 carries last week, he's averaging over 20 carries a game. That's going to be a problem this week against the number 1 rush defense, or number 2 rush defense. But let's be real. They're one of the best defenses when it comes to that particular position. And that's going to be a struggle for a guy who doesn't really get some volume in the backfield from the receiving position. Now, if they get him some receptions, I absolutely think that can change. But I haven't really seen that trend, so don't bank on that. The last position there, tight end, Jonnu Smith. Listen, guys, it's hard to kind of gauge Jonnu Smith. In my opinion, I think you play the matchups with him. Right now, like we talked about, tight end, and this is going to be a theme all year, tight end is super, super volatile right now. There is only one legit tight end option that you should feel comfortable if you have him in your lineups, and that's Travis Kelce. And that's not even close. Darren Waller, obviously, you feel okay about that, but most of those other tight ends are very hit or miss. Even Mark Andrews and guys that were top 5 tight ends last year struggling. Kill's out for the year. So the position's in flux, and there's no consistency. None. A lot of the same guys. I would say, honestly, the second most consistent guy behind maybe Travis Kelce is TJ Hawkinson, if we're being totally honest. So with that being said, guys, Jonnu Smith here, listen, he had a really nice matchup last week, and he only had 2 targets for 2 catches, but that was for 32 yards and a touchdown. I don't know what to make of this because in a matchup where you were going up against, let's see, Chicago, who is now giving up the 9th most fantasy points to tight ends currently, I kind of wanted more than 2 targets and 2 catches for Jonnu Smith. And by the way, guys, in the same matchup, Anthony Firkser, 6 targets, 3 catches for 19. So out-targeted him, out-caught him, but obviously Jonnu had more of the production, and that was very touchdown dependent. So unfortunately for us guys, in a matchup where you're going up against the number 32nd ranked team to tight ends, meaning they're giving up the least amount of points to that position, I'm going to go and sit Jonnu Smith. I don't trust it. In Showdown, you go for it. That's cool. If you want to do it for DraftKings and so forth. I'm talking seasonal right now. If you have a different option, I might avoid that. And it could be a tough one to do, but reality is the Tennessee side is facing a really tough defense, and we just don't know, if the volume is going to go to Jonnu Smith or to Anthony Firkser. So I think for the moment, if I was you and you had Jonnu Smith and I had someone else like a Dallas Goedert this week in a tougher matchup, well, not tougher matchup, but still a tough matchup, with Ertz out, I'd go Goddard over Jonnu Smith and things like that. So with that being said, guys, that's kind of where I would go with that. On the other side of things here, the Tennessee Titans now, their defense is a little bit easier to get fantasy points for. They are ranked 13th against the quarterbacks, guys. ranked 4th against wide receivers. So gave up the 4th most points to wide receivers, 8th most points to running backs, and the 11th most points to tight ends. So they're top 15 in terms of giving up the most points to certain positions in each different category here. Their weakest position groups, wide receivers and running backs. So those guys are scoring points against them. And of course, their tougher areas are quarterback at 13 and tight end at 11. Well, this is kind of weird because you know what? What that tells me is you start your Colts wide receivers and running backs. The problem is I don't know which ones to tell you to start. I mean, it is a crapshoot at wide receiver there. And like I said before, let's be real. I don't think any of us have started an Indianapolis wide receiver since week 5. So reality is, am I going to put Marcus Johnson, who I thought might have been the guy down the line a couple weeks ago, and then only for Mycole Pittman to come back to not do anything? Then there's Zach Pascal, and oh wait, T.Y. Hilton's coming back. Thank God for that. Listen, honestly, it's a weird matchup here. If it's for DFS, I like T.Y. I don't know if I love T.Y. I like Mycole Pittman to kind of sneak in here, maybe. I'll be honest with you guys. I think it's going to go through the tight ends most of all. Allie-Cox is the guy that I like on this Indianapolis offense out of anyone. Out of anyone right now. Now, I'll get into the running backs because theoretically, with the rankings here, giving up the 8th most points, they're a top 10 rushing defense in terms of giving up those points to running backs from a fantasy perspective. That tells me maybe you do stick with that. But I think at the end of the day, guys, you have to look at 2 things. Game script and the other defense. What the other defense tells me is that the Indianapolis side of things, or I'm sorry, the Tennessee side might struggle offensively to a degree, right? They just might not get that production. The other side, if they can keep this game close and honest, that's where I believe this could be the value of the Colts offense in this ballgame. And the reason I say that is because it's hard to not want to put in one of these running backs. Now, here's a little fun fact. If you decide you're going to go with, say, a Jonathan Taylor or Jordan Wilkins or Nyheim Hines. The Tennessee Titans running backs, by the way, that 8th projection, they're averaging around 22 points a game given up to running backs in particular. That's good, by the way, considering they were giving 37 points to wide receivers. But the 22.2, guys, 97.6 rushing yards a game the Tennessee Titans are giving up. They're giving up a lot of rushing yards for that top spot. Oh, and by the way, only around 4 receptions and 30 yards in the pass game for running backs. So what that tells me is that they're not getting beat in the pass game from the backfield. They're getting beat from the run game, grounding and pounding it down their throats. And if that trend continues, well, who does that give us? Jonathan Taylor or Jordan Wilkins? Basically, what I'm trying to tell you guys here is I would either probably go with Jonathan Taylor or Jordan Wilkins. I would probably rank it Jonathan Taylor, then Jordan Wilkins, even though the carries were a little bit more on Wilkins' side. Listen, Jonathan Taylor had the most productive day. He had the fumble, and sure, that was kind of one of those, hey, we're going to take you out things. But he also scored. He's also, in my opinion, I think when they see the other guys, they have these kind of boom games, and then they kind of flutter down to earth. That's kind of telling me that they're not sustained production. They're not taking the reins of the job and running with it, which means that this is open for competition still. And Jonathan Taylor still has, in my opinion, the best opportunity to get those touches tomorrow night on Thursday against this Tennessee team. And if that happens, I think he'll have some more running success this week. Now, this is all going to break down, as we mentioned, guys, to who is going to get the carries. So if that's being said, if it's not Jonathan Taylor, Jordan Wilkins is another potential guy who maybe both of them have some production here. Nyheim Hines, it's a give or take. If they can't get the run going, they're going to have to pass the ball against the number 4th ranked position to wide receivers, 11th against tight ends, so they can give up passing yards too. They're giving up to those positions about 250 yards on average to those two positions at any given week. So there's a lot of value. There's a lot of potential there for Nyheim Hines as well. If I was going to bank on it, guys, I would go for the rushing area. Now, I said this about Monday night. I was like, it's going to be a rushing game. It's going to be a rushing game. And guess what? It wasn't a rushing game. Somehow, Joe Flacco turned into Patrick Mahomes for a night. And all of a sudden, no one wanted to use the run. I mean, it was confusing from the Jets side. But the long story short here is that I do believe this might be a little bit more of a run game. There will be pass elements incorporated. So I do love A.J. Brown. And I kind of like Allie-Cox and maybe Trey Burton. I don't know which one of them. It's hard to gauge which is the better fantasy guy at any given week with this Indianapolis team. So I guess at the end of the day, this is what we're going to say. All right. if you have an Indianapolis Colts guy, if you have Trey Burton, if you have Jonathan Taylor, all right, I would be okay starting them because it's really not that bad of a matchup against Tennessee. Jonathan Taylor, Jordan Wilkins might be the two guys to start here. I actually really like Jonathan Taylor this week. I don't know why. I know it's a weird thing. I just have a feeling that he's going to do pretty well for you if you need to rely on him. Outside of that, guys, even though it's a great matchup, I'm having a hard time telling you to start any of these other guys.
Sitting throwing rocks across the pavement.